we're going to look at the sort of the evolution of security testing, so our standard testing that we do, how that sort of developed over time into sort of the more red teams or targeted testing that we're doing at the minute. I'll have a look at our approach and detail how we tie that into the kill chain, how we do the recon, the exploitation, and sort of moving through the network, and ultimately onto reporting. I'll demonstrate what we've seen in terms of effective techniques, in terms of what we do, that gets us into the network, that gets us across the network, and also the types of defenses that we're actually seeing. So what you guys are doing that works well, how it's slowing us down, and onto how we sort of bypass that, and ultimately get onto the network. We'll cover the sort of successful red teams. We've done quite a lot of them at the minute, which you'll see over the course of a few years, a lot of sort of CBETs recently. And in that, we've had quite a lot of success in gaining entry into networks, and sort of exploiting the network and getting to the end goals. So I'll demonstrate and show you what we've done and what we consider to be a successful red team from our perspective and your perspective as well. With that in mind, I think it's important to look at the common pitfalls, so we'll look at that. As testing red teams become more familiar, it's easy to fall into sort of common pitfalls where things go wrong, and you don't get as much value out of the testing. So what we want to do is just to show you guys or to demonstrate, looking forward, what we think will provide the most value in terms of red teaming, and sort of the reports and how to deliver on that, and ultimately sort of increase your defences and improve your SOC team and things like that. But again, I'll demonstrate that. So, that in mind, traditional sort of security testing. Apologies for my Visio diagram, that was quite small. But in terms of testing, originally sort of testing would focus on an attacker from an external perspective gaining entry into the network. Quite simplistic, not too much complexity involved. Ultimately, it's quite a good simulation of what an attacker does. In terms of testing, it's quite targeted against external network, getting in and onto the internal network and exploiting domains or systems and services. So quite a useful exercise. Over time, though, the problem has obviously got more complex as it's become more of a concern. Budgets have increased, security and sophistication has increased, and it's become more difficult. So testing, from our experiences, has sort of focused on testing individual systems. So whereas before I was trying to get external to internal, we're looking at actually testing the people, testing maybe laptop build reviews, firewalls, straight to web servers and performing build reviews, quite compartmentalized testing. So not really looking at the whole picture, which is all fine. It sort of identifies quite a lot of issues, allows us to triage those issues in terms of risk and impact, and to ultimately sort of remediate them based on importance, and very good for what we do in providing assurance. It's more a sort of, I suppose, breadth-based approach. You kind of identify quite a lot of, provide sort of wide coverage, so identify a lot of issues. But often each test is quite limited or quite compartmentalized to your department or your project. So it's clear that from this perspective, whilst good, it's missing quite a lot. So it's missing quite a lot of interaction between the different systems, potentially the people involved, and those defences. So it can be quite fractured and may miss the whole picture, essentially. So it also sort of, at times, can miss out on the attacker perspective. So whereas Red Team, as you'll see, focuses more on the attacker, their sort of tactics, this can miss it out. It may as well, given that we're sort of testing individual systems or servers or applications. A lot of times we ask you defensively to maybe turn off firewalls, IDS, because that way we can allow our testing to continue. We identify all the issues and then you can turn it back on. So it doesn't really test those defenses in the same way that a red team would. And sorry, ultimately, again, missing picture from that is the defensive team. So the SOC, the networks team, we're not really involving them in the overall scope of the testing. So as we'll see, it's quite an important step to provide value. So red team versus pen tests, obviously, they can mean red team can mean different things to different people, but ultimately we're talking about testing the whole business and processes. So quite a sort of a wide test in terms of attacking the processes, the systems, and the people. So there's sort of multiple facets of a red team test. Pen tests themselves can be quite sort of thorough. And I said we can triage the issues in terms of seriousness and fix them accordingly. Often a red team will turn up issues that are not necessarily technical, so maybe the fact that you're not training people in identifying phishing emails. So there's sort of other issues that are taken into account there and can provide sort of a bigger picture in the business. So ultimately it's complementary. Looks at the business as a whole. Our red team approach, in terms of testing, it's depth versus breadth. So we're sort of starting on the outside and working our way in. We're not identifying every issue. We're identifying an attack path from external into internal. Ultimately, we're trying to reach a goal. So that goal may be an important system, an important database, or to gain control over the whole network. As I said, we're looking to target people and processes as well as technology. So are your people aware of phishing emails? Will they alert your team to malicious emails? And is there sort of a general culture of awareness, which you wouldn't actually get in a standard pen test? We're identifying or assessing the capability of an organization. So to identify firstly the test, so when it happens from an attack perspective, what do you do in that instance? How do you firstly identify it? Do you react to that in a sensible way? Can you actually defend against the types of attacks or the people that might be sort of exploiting you or attempting to exploit your organization? And how do you respond to those attacks in an appropriate manner? As you'll see later from subsequent presentations, we'll go through the various methods that attackers are actually using now to get into the network and the current methods for defending against that and detecting them. So from our perspective, an end-to-end sort of real-world assessment. It's sort of attacker-focused. Often we begin the test with minimal knowledge. We perform our reconnaissance and we know nothing about the business, and it's up to us to identify the IPs, the sort of architecture, the people that work within the business. So quite a real-world representation. And we test with all the security controls in place. So where I talked about briefly the IPS, so the firewalls that are turned off, we want all those in place, and we want your security teams to act as they normally would, to provide you sort of an overview or a real picture as to what would happen in the event of an attack. Threat-led or attacker simulation. So the likes of CBEST, obviously a threat intelligence report would feed into those tests to identify actually who is willing or looking to attack your business and what the actual threats are, what their modus operandi is for attacking you, and we try and replicate that according to the intelligence that's out there. The biggest question we get for these engagements, potentially we compromise your network from externally, we email people, we try and exploit the browser, and we attack sort of important systems. We may be getting to an important mainframe in a bank, and that obviously makes people nervous. For us, a big important part, an important step in the early stages is the risk mitigation. So how do we make it safe, make it worthwhile, but also keep the scope quite loose in terms of we shouldn't be restricted from attacking certain systems or taking certain attack paths because it's not representative. So we will sort of identify systems, we'll identify a person that can sort of escalate our requests. Can we attack this system? Can we move to this network? And we do it in such a way that is safe and sort of presents the most value to you guys, and whilst sort of keeping the network up and secure and safe. So as I said, it considers the whole picture rather than specific systems. So some of you may have seen this before. It's based on the Lockheed Martin kill chain, and we base our methodology, our testing on this. For those of you that have gone through a CBEST or a red team with us, it will be based on this. So for people that are not aware, essentially recon, staging, exploitation, control of movement, actions on target, and persistence and egress. So can we stay in the network? Can we take that data? Recon, essentially identifying information about the business, the people that we can attack. Staging is essentially the setup of our environments, our
implants that we want to deliver to the network, our email campaigns that we're going to deliver. I'll show examples of those a bit later on. Exploitation, self-explanatory in terms of how we get in. Do we send an email? Does it exploit your employees' browsers based on patched software to actually allow us to get into the network? The next two are sort of the movement around the network. So internally, can we get to the important systems that we've designated as flags, an important database, or an important application, for example? And as I said, persistent egress is can we take data out? So an important aspect a lot of times to see is there sensitive information that you have that we try and extract from the network. And we demonstrate that in a sort of a manner that allows you to determine that if someone compromised your network, can they get that important data out? You'll see checkpoints there. It's important to have the checkpoints. At each stage, we can assess and risk manage. So at the end of each phase, we can continue into the next stage, taking into account the systems we may want to go after. And that will be done in a controlled sort of manner with the point of contact we've established early on. And the sort of cyclical arrow you see there in terms of reiterating the process at a lower stealth or higher sophistication levels, we can do is sort of increase stealth, or alternatively, if you're looking to measure the ability of your SOC or detection capability, what we can do is we can increase the noise. So when we're on the network, are we detected? If we're not detected, obviously it's not good in terms of the response capability, but what we can do is we can increase the noise, start scanning internally, firing off antivirus, things like that to allow you to sort of respond or hopefully respond or detect what's happening on the network and subsequently observe your response capabilities. So from our perspective, easy wins for an attacker, things that we've sort of seen in the past. Attackers will be looking to compromise profiling software, vulnerable software from the internet, whether it be being able to sort of fingerprint users via emails or detecting on bulletin boards, forums, sort of information that you run internally on your network. We've observed attackers sort of using recent exploits, vulnerability, shell shock, to compromise various servers on the internet. And these are things we've done in the past on particular engagements to get into a network from an external perspective. Sending a single email, gaining access to 300 workstations internally. Again, it's something we've done on red teams and has happened. Ultimately, these things aren't very complex. In reality, the attacks that we have observed and continue to observe are more complex, but these are the sort of things that we've done and have allowed us into networks and to fully compromise an organization. Fly under the radar using simple, undetectable tools. So how do we stay hidden? Using default database passwords to actually access databases on the internet or internally, or using sort of default passwords to access every server in the network. So these are sort of things that an attacker is looking for, and us as red teamers will look for as well. Extracting data from the network securely over HTTPS. Often you may have egress filtering on the network. We can simply bypass using that HTTPS essentially. And another one, we find people regularly looking for passwords on the likes of Pastebin on the internet and using these to gain access remotely through remote access software. So these are the sort of kind of things you'd be looking for, and this is the kind of things that attackers are looking for. From our perspective, I've broken it down into the aligned with the kill chain, so it makes it a bit more straightforward to understand what we're actually doing. In terms of red teams, the initial from the outset, we look to gather that information. For our purposes, recon, can we gather information about the business? Our go-to at the moment, and still seems to work well, seems to be quite a problem for businesses, is LinkedIn. We use that to acquire quite a lot of emails. We've used that to great success in the past to gather sort of email addresses, job titles, information for people that we want to target in the business. And this feeds into later attack delivery stages. And it's something we always raise people in terms of their profile online. It's quite a useful technique. Shodan, if you've not heard of it, is sort of a technical sort of search engine for vulnerable systems on the internet. Using this, we can do or identify systems on your network or externally facing in a passive manner. So we're not actually touching your system. So we can use this, and attackers can use this to identify systems on your network externally that are potentially vulnerable and allow us to attack them and in later stages and get into the network. Attack delivery, so how do we actually get in? How do we exploit you? How do we get onto your network? How do we attack your users? So from our perspective, and based on what clients are feeding back to us in terms of what they've detected or not detected, we find that sort of very low email numbers. We target people 100 emails for an engagement. Was quite low. It has been used successfully in the past by various threat actors, and it is happening in the real world. As a big bank or a telco, clients are generally expecting us to send hundreds, thousands of emails and get a hit on those. They're the ones that are detected quite readily. So far, on any engagement that I've been on, we've had quite a high success rate of not being detected unless we've been asked to increase it. And you'll see that comes down again to awareness and the types of emails we send. Sophisticated email campaigns, we try and sort of do campaigns that are easily forgettable, can be resent, can be reused, and are quite sophisticated and backed by actual websites, which I'll show you examples of in a few seconds, which seem to work well for us. Businesses are expecting badly worded emails that they see in their Gmail inboxes every day, and we try and differentiate and use what actual sophisticated threat actors are using to a high degree of success. Repeated emails to a small number of users. Again, if they're forgettable, users don't forward them on to the security team. Unsubscribe. This one, again, I'll show you, has proved very successful for us. So at the bottom of every email that we send, we provide an unsubscribe link. If we repeatedly send emails that are forgettable to a user, they think they've been added to a mailing list of some sort. Most times, a lot of our clicks come from users clicking unsubscribe because they don't want the emails anymore. And that's proved successful in a number of campaigns and red teams, more often than not, because people just want to get rid of the emails. Whitelisting our own sites. Now this, in terms of defensive capability, I'll talk about. It's becoming, of the red teams we've done, we've sort of tested harder, more difficult to us sort of financial businesses and banks with sort of quite robust external infrastructure in terms of defenses. Quite a popular one is reputational filtering on URLs or websites that a user may browse to for the first time. A lot of times the bank or the proxy to get there will be blocked based on its reputation. It's the first time it's ever seen a website. We have found that in some instances we can approve our own sites for those systems, and that allows us to approve a website that we've created so that the bank will approve it internally. And that again has proved very successful. Internally, so when we're inside, what actually works for us in staying undetected? Windows tools, so your standard Windows tools. We try not to place stuff on the systems that will be easily detected. This includes PowerShell. For those not familiar, it's just a Windows tool, and that proves quite successful in terms of staying hidden and allowing us to move around the network. Credential dumping, again, has worked for us. Plain text credentials, we're getting onto servers, we're dumping credentials for important users on the network, which ultimately allows us to compromise the whole domain and potentially move to other environments. Network share and enumeration. So big organizations a lot of times have lots of file shares, lots of personal file shares internally. What we're finding is that we're getting a lot of configuration information, usernames, passwords, and in nearly every, red team we've done, this has been a quick win to obtaining high-level credentials to giving us access to the full network. Another interesting one, naming conventions for systems and Active Directory, where we have to identify an important system, be it a mainframe or a production mainframe, for example. They are quite often helpfully named as production mainframe. So by enumerating the network domain, we can quickly triage and identify systems of importance. So these are things just to be aware that we do and constantly do. So in terms of defensive capabilities, just in terms of staying persistent, maintaining access, we use scheduled tasks, again, Windows capabilities, Windows functionality to stay in the network and on systems. More recently, we've used single-factor authentication on Citrix or remote access solutions. So where we found passwords internally, we can just reuse them on your own external interfaces to allow us to gain access through a system that you expect to be accessed remotely. So quite good for staying hidden. Data exfiltration, just extracting data over HTTPS or secure encrypted communications has proved quite useful for us in getting data off your networks. So in terms of campaigns we've done, this is an example of a sophisticated website that we've backed our email campaigns, so more towards social media. So you can see we've sort of improved the appearance of it, and it looks professional. So where it is detected, it doesn't look too conspicuous compared to some of the emails that you would see. A forgettable email, you can see we've sort of repeatedly sent emails targeted against users, sending news updates on a daily basis relevant to their business. If we send this to 2 or 3 days in a row, we've had people that read every article, quite interestingly, and repeatedly being exploited by the same article. If you tailor it to their business, their sort of area of industry. And you'll see at the bottom the unsubscribe link. So that's where we send it more and more, send it over a couple of days. Users will click that unsubscribe link, and from that we can exploit them or fingerprint their internal systems. An example of one that hasn't worked so well for us, it's just a Word document with a macro made to look like it can only be read when macros are enabled. Not so effective. So, defenses. So in terms of what you guys are doing or can do well and have done well, is what we're seeing in terms of what's slowed us down. Sort of on the border, quite a lot of money has been spent on URL reputation filtering, whitelisting, which I briefly talked about, and we can bypass this in some cases, but it will verify a URL or a website. So if we create a brand new website, we email one of your employees, they click on that link, the network hasn't seen that website before, so it just blocks it. So we can never get an attack into the network unless we can find a way to get it approved in advance. In terms of SSL man in the middle, in terms of what we've done previously is sending malware into the network. Border devices, be it your FireEyes or similar, will have the ability to look into encrypted traffic if set up correctly. Where that's enabled, it stopped us getting exploits onto the network. A lot of times for an expensive piece of kit, we find that it's not enabled, and it allows us to bypass that quite easily. So configuring it properly works well. Patch everything, goes without saying, I'm sure you're all aware. Whether we exploit stuff in employee systems on their client browsers or internally on the network, it's sort of a quick win to stopping us as red teamers getting in. Improving user awareness, again, you'll all be familiar with this. I think we've seen an increase in how aware people are, and that's great. What we haven't seen so much is an awareness of, actually, when I get malicious email, what do I do with it? Do I forward it on? Do I delete it? We're seeing quite a lot of cases it's actually just deleted and nobody's alerted. And that can be an indicative of an attack ongoing. Develop improved capability to respond to alerts. Again, pretty straightforward. Once we're in, so a lot of times defensively on the border, it's working quite well, but once we're actually inside, that's where the problems begin. There's sort of limited detection on that. Restrict and minimize use of administrative accounts and privileged accounts. So again, goes without saying, where an organization is large, these privileged accounts need to be managed. A lot of times we're seeing it on Windows domains where they're running services across the business, and all we have to do is get onto one system and dump those plain text credentials and gain access to everything essentially. And from there, it's usually game over. Auditing passwords, password quality, default passwords, and lifetime. So password lifetime is an important one. Very often we're on networks and we've seen passwords of extended over numbers of years where they have never been changed. And that for us is an easy win. We get one password, that means we can use it as long as we want. And segregate systems where possible. So segregating those networks, Windows from Unix environments. Easier said than done, appreciate that. But you can sort of start off in terms of keeping those architects separate. So we can't get anywhere from an employee network to important dev systems or production networks. Again, network shares I alluded to, so locking them down, preventing access, stopping users from putting usernames, passwords, configurations into those network shares. Again, easier said than done, but we've used that quite successfully in the past to compromise whole networks. So something to be aware of. So, successful red team. I think context ourselves, we've been doing these longer than over 5 years now, approximately sort of 50 plus in terms of what we've done. And we're constantly improving. So each engagement allows us to improve on how we do things, how we respond to things. A lot of large organizations haven't had these, and I think it's important to look towards sort of implementing these. CBEST, things like that, have obviously improved it for financial institutions, but we're seeing other large sectors coming in now, and these are proven to be an easier target. So for us, a successful one is gaining entry. For a customer client, a successful one is preventing us from getting in, which is relatively okay, but if we're not getting in or we're not getting anywhere, we're not showing you the full picture. And I think it's important to sort of add value, which I'll come on to. Okay, so what we've seen, improvement over the test we've done, a large improvement in user awareness, in technical capability and defensive capabilities. But what we are seeing is internally, it's not quite there. So internal detection, internal response is lacking. And when it's actually detected, what happens? Are we removed from the network? Is it locked down? Is that system taken off the network? That sort of stuff is slowly coming around, but not quick enough from what we're seeing. So, improvements. So how we do for time. Some organisations have working Scott Operation Centres, which is great, but in larger organisations have quite a lot to deal with. They've invested massively in security technologies. Some of it works, most of it works in its own way. A lot of times we're seeing it's not configured to work to defend against all types of attacks. So I think red teams and sort of targeted scenario-based attacks will sort of allow you to configure them properly and to readily defend against the types of attacks that we're doing. Some companies have been red team, and it's been quite an eye-opener. And they've sort of sought the value in that and made the relevant changes, fixes, but quite easily it falls back into, once they've made those fixes, they assume all is well. So there still is a long way to go. The tested companies that we've assessed in terms of banks, for us, they're the more difficult end of the scale. As I said, we're seeing different sectors that maybe telcos, very large, that are not as mature. It's proving quite. So, given that we've done quite a lot, in terms of what we see as common pitfalls. So as it becomes common, it's easy to fall into these sort of negative attributes. So from our experience, just hacking some stuff, we can target any systems, hack impressive systems, be they mainframes, but is that relevant to your business? Is that the important stuff that we're actually attacking? So I think it's important to focus on what's relevant to your business and sort of giving you the most value. By any means available, again, if you're just telling us to attack your network and get in however you want, it is useful for us, but it might not give you the whole picture. So if we got in via an open window, and our solution is to install an alarm, close the window, you're probably missing the whole point in terms of an attacker exploiting you using internet-based exploits via email. So I think it's important to focus on what is your actual threat, what is your actual threat actor. This is more relevant to sort of CBEST, but providing a detailed simulation on various threat actors in a very short space of time. We try and provide a view on that. We try and demonstrate a direction of travel towards the end goal. It's not always possible in those 2 weeks. So again, I think it's important to sort of focus on the main threats to your business and what will provide the best view of what your current status is. These ones are, I suppose, more for us as testers in terms of pitfalls. So getting in, staying undetected, and then getting out of the network. A lot of times we've done that. We've been undetected. We've never we haven't been noticed. We've done our job, and at no point has the networks team detected us. Looks good for us. Doesn't look so good for you guys. But ultimately, what is the value in that for you? Your SOC team, your networks team learns nothing. The systems you have in place, you've learned nothing about them, what they can defend against, what way they can be configured to defend against attacks from red teams or actual attackers. Delivering the big scary report. So yeah, we find a lot of issues, we deliver that report, and we don't action anything on it. So you go to implement your recommendations, everything's okay, but how do we take that further? We need to, as a company, as the red team, as a security company, we need to provide you additional value and sort of suggest ways that you can improve, work with you to sort of improve and look further down the line. So, from our perspective, just carrying out the assessment isn't enough. We're seeing a requirement more to provide more value. And for us, that's is giving improvements to the networks team, the SOC capability. Red team should be a training exercise for everyone involved, and we should be improving those scenarios to make them more relevant. So what can we do? And we're seeing an uptick in sort of requests for this. It may be new to you, but it's something that's ongoing and something definitely of value. So combining the red teams and the blue teams being the defensive SOC networks team capability, combining them to make sort of a purple team engagement. And actually taking both aspects and using them, working together to sort of provide a better assessment. Or be more specific. So actually taking the whole red team and becoming more specific in the scenarios that we implement. And I'll provide some examples here. So obviously the first red team, it's quite a wake-up call, but we should be treating subsequent ones as a training exercise, so we know what state the network is. We can work out what your SOC or your networks team did, what they saw, what they didn't see. So did they detect our implant? Did you detect our emails? And sort of do a gap analysis on what you expected to detect and what you shouldn't have. Move away from adversarial win or lose. So a lot of times we come in and do the job, and if a networks team isn't too happy that they haven't detected stuff, then again, it's quite combative. We should be working together in terms of actually, this is what we did, this is what you should have seen, and how can we get to that point where you've seen it, you've detected it using your tools, which the guys will talk about, and what can you do to defend against it next time? Get in and get out of being seen. So again, it's good being stealthy, but what value does it provide? So we should be raising the game, we should be increasing the alerts, we should be allowing you to detect and respond to what we're doing, and then working with you afterwards to see where those gaps are. So define metrics and apply them to defensive techniques. I think this will work more to play into the next presentation where we talk about stuff, so I'll move on from that. Kinds of questions we can ask. Where were you spotted? What level of coverage does SOC have? Did the SOC get lucky? So was it one bad email? Was it one bad piece of software we've downloaded and it's been alerted and we were detected and kicked out? Or was it actual defensive systems that caught us? And how can we refine them to be more effective next time? As I said, purple team, comparing attacker logs and defender logs. I think this is an important one. We do it for the CBEST and working with KPIs. I think it should be play a bigger part in our red teams going forward, and it should do in anything we do because it provides that overview, that picture, and refine answers and repeat based on the answers that we find from these questions. The benefits, greater understanding of the risk, how we can attack, how we can defend, how can we improve on what we're doing. And for us, it improves our ability to attack and to sort of advise you on how to effectively defend against it and implement those solutions. So it's not completely one way for a client, for customers. It works to our advantage as a pen test company as well. And finally, we think more useful in terms of going forward, a sort of targeted white box red teaming, so more specific engagements around various scenarios. So whilst you may defend against what we've done, we can't get in, we can't get emails in the 2 or 3 weeks that we're there to test, ultimately you're still at risk of attackers, so they may get in another way. So we think we should be focusing more on the types of scenarios that we can use. So can we get onto a border device? Can we, from that border device, can we get into the network? Can we subvert various network traffic, things like that? And can you identify that, or can we do that without triggering an alert? If we trigger an alert, what do you do in terms of response? And this is something that, looking forward, seems to be, we seem to get more and more requests for it. So if we're actually already internal, so we do away with the phishing emails, we do away with the, because we assume that we're going to get in via phishing. So from that point on the network, what can we do? How can we get to the important system? Or how can we sort of do it in such a way that that's not detected? Ultimately, consider what controls we're testing, targeting against known elements of the environment. More detailed, sort of more defined tactics and techniques and procedures from current attackers. So we need to stay relevant to what's actually going on. If we're doing attacks that attackers are not doing, then it's not representative view. You can't configure your defensive systems to defend against that. It's a waste of time. So more specific training goals. So we're looking to train the SOC in identifying us and working together to get to that point. From that then, going further, repeat the process and improve it. Refine that SOC or that network's capability, defensive capability, until you can deal with an array of attack types. So it should not just be one attack path that you can defend against. It should be a range, and that will sort of come from the various testing or targeted scenarios that we're doing. Ultimately, we need to sort of continue and improve on this. So once we've gotten it to that point that it's secure, can we look to bypass those defenses? So we do that quite a lot for some engagements where we work out ways that we can creatively bypass defenses. So whilst continuing to emulate the current types of attacks that are becoming very advanced. So finally, end results. How's this going to work to our advantage? It will ultimately allow you and the SOC defensive capabilities to maximize the sort of training and experience on those internal tools that you already have. Develop, maintain those skill sets using those tools, and as I said, defend against a range of attacks. Where we've done engagements that this has worked well, we found it very difficult to get in and to stay in. So taking this sort of approach works quite well in our experience. And ultimately, rather than buying in more capability that you're using or you're not using effectively, we're sort of encouraging the reuse of that, an intelligent use of that in a secure way, configured properly, ultimately defending against those attacks that we're trying to perform in a red team. And as I said, it's not a one-way thing. It's beneficial to us because it ups our game, requires us to improve and constantly learn. So it works both ways. And that's it. Any questions?
Hello, thank you very much for your talk. So you mentioned earlier that after being red teamed, a company fixed their weaknesses, but obviously these fixes don't last forever.
Yeah.
So how often would you recommend that company get red teamed or tested?
At the current status, I think we do it every 6 months. Is quite depending on the fixes we've suggested. Sometimes because they're not technical fixes, so we say patch your software, patch your server. It's quite an easy fix, and we can retest that the same week. These things are much longer. So is the recommendation user awareness training? Is it sort of network segregation? These, depending on the business and how much they're willing to invest in that, it can take anywhere from 6 months to a year for larger organizations. So we sort of retest maybe twice a year. I have done in the past. Something like this in the later stages, we're talking about sort of purple teams or development of more targeted, specific focus testing. You could do that more regularly because of specific scenarios, but sort of still considering the various attacks and retesting those defenses in a particular area.